Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's Criterion Learning Series. I apologize for the slideshow being off for a second. Today, we're going to be covering the Affordable Care Act reporting in Criterion. And I do want to remind everybody that we do have a Q&A as well as a chat. So feel free to ask questions if you have any questions about what you're seeing. Of course, we're not going to be able to, as you can see here, answer questions about taxability of things and perhaps, how your company is set up for ACA and stuff like that. We can answer how the system will generate the files, how you can make changes that are appropriate and things like that. So that's what we can provide here. And those are the questions and what I'm going to show you today. So if you have questions about those things, please feel free to ask us. And we're going to be here to answer those questions. And if we cannot, we'll get back to you after today's session. So I do want to remind people of some filing deadlines that are out there. So you need to furnish your 1095-C to your employees by March 3rd of 2025. So that's the deadline for the paper forms. And of course, if you make them online and things like that, whether you mail them or you hand them out, they need to be done by the 3rd of March. You do need to submit the forms if you're going to do it by paper to the IRS by February 28th. So actually a couple of days before they're due to the employees. However, if you're going to do it electronically, then you actually do get a little bit more time till the end of March. So March 31st is when you'll need to submit the forms if you do them electronically. So let's go into the system here and we can talk about how we would actually do these forms in the system and what that means. So let me switch my browser to be showing here. And of course, everything you're going to see us do right now is going to be in the administrative side because that's where you generate the forms and publish the forms and things like that and make the changes. So I'm going to immediately jump over to the performance or the administrative side of the system here. Of course, what you could do is just go here to HR or payroll to get there. Now, I do want to point something out here. ACA reporting, the actual generation of the file, is available in the settings. So you'll need to make sure, of course, that you have access to that in your security. Perhaps you have a profile that maybe somebody didn't understand where ACA filing was and they limited your access. It is here under HR administration. So you'll want to make sure that you are able to see that. If not, we're here to help you to let you know what would need to be changed in your security profiles, and then you can work with whoever it is that does that for you to update those to make sure you have access to it. Now, this is something that, of course, is done per employer. As you can see, I have 2 employers. I'm just going to bother doing it with one because really it's no change between the 2, but just so you're aware there. And of course, this is the button to create the ACA file for the previous year. Now, you may have already done this, which is fine. You can always regenerate it if you haven't made any changes. You're not really going to lose anything if you regenerate it by deleting the old one. So I'm going to go ahead and hit that button here. It'll just take me a few seconds. Yours might take longer depending on the number of employees you have. As you can see here, I have 135 employees. Of course, if you had 1,000 employees, it probably would take a little bit longer to run, but it's not going to be unreasonable to create that. And you'll see here when you click into it, you're kind of getting what's on the 1094, which is the employer form. And you can see here, the contact name with the first and last name, the title, and the phone number. And of course, these are required on the form. So you want to fill that out. And then as you scroll down, you'll see the months that are out here. And of course, you'll see the employee counts for those months. Assuming you did your minimal essential coverage offer, you can check that box right there. And if you are part of a larger group, you can check that box right there. Perhaps you have multiple employers like I have, and you need to put that information in there. So you'll check that box right there. And then if you did have multiple employers, you'll see down here where you can add them in. So you just click add and type in the name of the employer and their FEIN. So very simple right there. Of course, you'll need to do that on both employers because, they are for each other, they're beyond there. So just go ahead and put that in there for both. Now, you'll notice here, of course, when I'm looking at this, I don't see the employees' actual forms. and I can't really, on screen here, see if they're correct, because there might be situations where you had some folks who, maybe they had a change. You want to make sure the form is correct to reflect that they went for part-time to full-time, or maybe they were hired and then they were terminated and then they came back. You just want to make sure that things are showing correctly on the forms. So you have a couple of options for how to look at those. So first off, if you want to see the forms themselves, you can click the download button, and that'll take, depending on how many forms, it'll take a little while. You'll notice mine will take a minute or so to download. The other option, the one that I like myself, is to click on the import button here, and then you can download an Excel version of the forms. Now, of course, it's not the form itself, it's the data that's on the form. So you would click that little download button there, and it's going to give you a spreadsheet. Of course, it'll save to where your downloads are, and yours, of course, might be different than where mine go. Mine happens to go to my downloads folder. Yours would be, wherever you save your files when you download files. Let me show you what that would look like if you want to take a look at the file. And we'll talk about how this all looks in here. And so I'll just share this in Excel. You should be able to see this screen here. So you'll notice that we're going to start off with the employee's information on the right there. In fact, let me just zoom in a little bit so it's a little clearer. I know it's kind of small. So we have the employee's information here, and we have their name, their social, their address, their city, state, zip. That's, of course, from their demographics and address information. So if you notice something is incorrect here, you're missing a social, the address is wrong, whatever it is, go back and fix it on the employee's record as well. Because if I fix it here on the spreadsheet, it does not go back and update it onto the employee. All right, it will update it onto the form, but it does not go all the way back to the employee's record and like change their address or whatever the situation is. So you're certainly welcome to change it here and put in, whatever their social is, and, just type it in. But as I mentioned, it's not going to go back and update the employee. So you can edit that in Excel here and do that. What I would recommend is, especially, you'll see how I have a few of them where I'm missing information here. Probably go back, fix those employees, delete what you've created, and then generate it again. So that way you're not really doing dual entry. You're just updating the employee in the system, and then you regenerate the files and they're going to be updated. All right. Now the plan start month, that's assuming that that's when your plan starts. Of course, you could, it could be different. Your plan start month may not have been January for whatever reason. You just type in the month. So 01 would be January, 12 would be December, and all the numbers in between be the other months. So you can go ahead and do that there. All right. If you were self-insured, you can go ahead and indicate that right here that you were self-insured. Of course, what that means is you not only have to do the 1095C, but also the B, which includes the dependent information. So that will determine that works. And there's actually a setting on your benefits where you can indicate that you're self-insured. So preferably you would go and set it up there rather than going through the file and putting it in there. All right, now you'll see the offer of coverage code, either for the year, if they were here all year long, or if they were not, then you'll see over to the right a little bit is each month. So those are the various codes that apply to the offer of coverage. And I just had that up on my screen here a moment ago because I can't remember all the codes, even though I've been doing this for a long time. I don't remember all the codes there, but if you look at the IRS website, you can, find these codes out there and what they all mean. So 1E, basically is saying that it was offered to the employees and to the dependents, so their children and spouse. So that's what that means there. On there, you'll see a 1A. That I'm not going to go through every one, but just different ones. So that's the minimal essential coverage offered to full-time employees with their contribution was equal to or less than 9.5% of the federal poverty line. So you'll see that right there on the various ones. And of course, if it was blank, that means that they were not here the entire year because they didn't have the offer of coverage for the entire year. So perhaps they were hired mid-year or they terminated sometime, so it would be blank. And of course, I'm going to go over and show you the individual months. You'll see, January through December right here, and those codes that apply right there. And if you see a blank, that means that they were not in the system in that month, or maybe they were hired in the middle of the month, depending on whatever the situation was. You'll see 1A or 1E or whatever their situation was for the months where they were offered coverage. Now, if you look at this and you say, well, wait a minute, why was this person not offered? You may need to go back and look at their employment history, their position, et cetera, to determine, is this correct? So if you think that somebody is wrong here and you go back and you look at them, you may notice that their hire date is in March. And then you might remember, oh, yes, that's right. They were hired in March, and that's why it's showing it that way. But let's say they weren't hired in March and they were hired in February. Maybe the system is not correct. Maybe on their employment record, it shows March, but they were really hired in February. Go ahead and fix that on the employment screen on their position to make sure that it's correct. And then you can always regenerate the file. If it's just for one employee, you could always just type in the value instead of regenerating the entire file. It really depends on your situation there. Of course, the other way would be if somebody termed in the year. I don't know if I have anybody in here. Here's an example. So this is somebody who termed, and so they didn't have coverage in December. Maybe they terminated in November. And so that's why I would have a blank on the other side. And I don't know if I have anybody who's kind of in the middle who had blanks at the beginning of the year, maybe blanks at the end of the year. Of course, that would mean that they maybe were hired early in February and then they were terminated in November or something like that. So you may have blanks on both sides. All right, so that's where you can look at that right there. I'm going to go over. And so this would be the employee share for the year as well as each month. If you recording that information, if you're doing the minimal essential coverage, you don't need to. So in my situation, it's 0. And here are the codes that go into, I believe it's box 16 on the form. And so it determines, were they an employee in that month? So the different codes there, starting with the top one, they were basically an employee the entire month. We're using that to determine, their safe harbor there. If I go down to that person who had some blanks in this couple of months, so I see 2A and 2D. So 2A is, they were not employed during that month. So that's why it's 2A. And then 2D, it's they were in that period of time where you don't offer coverage to them. So maybe this person was hired in the middle of March and they have to work a certain number of hours or days before they are eligible for coverage. And that's why it starts saying 2H in July. All right. And so you can see how that works there. And here's another example. Somebody wasn't hired until perhaps sometime in August, and they didn't qualify until November, December. And of course, you may have it the other way around. If I find that person who was terminated, here's that. Here they are. The person who was terminated 2A, they weren't employing that month. Now 2C, now you probably should understand all these codes. There's, like I said, you can go to the IRS and find out what they should be. I did see 2C up here. So that would be, maybe they were on COBRA. Maybe they were in a plan that didn't meet the minimal essential coverage if you have one of those plans. So there's different things that it could mean. And then you need to look at that situation. Perhaps they were part-time. So you might see 2B out here. If they were part-time, maybe they're only working 2 hours a day or something. You may see 2B out here. So that'd be something that's on the position screen. You need to correct that. So anyways, that is kind of a review of this file. If you make changes to this file, like I said, maybe you do change something in these codings here or something like that, of course, save your spreadsheet and then you can upload it back into the system and it will update into the forms. So let me go back into the system here. Somewhere I have it. Hang on a second. Okay, so on this screen, if I had changed something in the file, you'll notice here, the import will overwrite current year value. So it's not going to go back to like previous ACA forms and update those. It's just going to update the current forms for the year. And, then it's going to update all those employees that may have been fixed in there. As I mentioned, there are certain things I would highly recommend you do directly on the employee, like their address is wrong or something like that. So just as a reminder, if this person's address was wrong, I can go and fix their name, their social. If it was, not in here, you can see like there's their social, here's their address and so forth. So if something was incorrect, then, fix it here and perhaps regenerate the forms. Again, it's a matter of how many are you fixing. This one employee, you can probably just do it in the file, do it here, and you're good. If you had a number of them, I'd say do it on the record and regenerate. So how would you regenerate? Once you go back in here, you'll notice there's a delete button right here. So you just delete this, and then you can generate again. And it will recreate the file. It will pull in new information that you updated their addresses and so forth. And then, of course, you can review the file again. So that is how you can do that right there. Let me talk about the actual file itself. That if I do the download forms, what it will do is it'll create one big zip file with all of the different forms in it. So you'll get a file called aca.zip, or if you've already downloaded it more than once, it might say ACA1, 2, et cetera, depending. But, of course, pay attention to that. And it's going to save wherever you have your zip files saved, or I should say your downloads saved. It also includes the 1094 in there. And let me bring up what that would look like in case you're not familiar or you just want to see what we would do here. So here's a preview of the 1094. All right, it's basically the same information you just saw on the screen there. So the contact information, of course, your company information and addresses. So you will want to make sure that this stuff is correct. If you see the EIN is wrong, you may have other problems with other tax forms and stuff like that. But maybe there's a misspelling in the city or something. Then you can fix that on the work location and fix that information there. Hopefully you don't have something with the employer, because that may have impacts on things like their W-2s if you're doing that. The contact name, you may have remembered I was on that screen. So if I put my name there, it would have shown up, but I didn't. And then you'll see, of course, the different check boxes, your for the ALE and the different months and so forth that I have here. So whatever I had checked would be there. And of course, if I put those other employers in here, I'd see them. So that's the 1094. And then I'll bring up an example of a 1095. I'll just pick somebody. Okay, so here you can see an example of the 1095. Of course, the employee information, which you just saw in the spreadsheet. So all this information in here, and then the lines 14, 15, and 16 that we were just talking about. So you'll see that information there. All right, we also print the other side of the form, the part that goes on the back. And then this is the covered individual. So if you were self coverage there, you might see the spouse and their social, and then the months that they were covered and things like that with the instructions for this part. So you can see all that information right there. So that's an example of those forms and how that would look on the PDF. And of course, if maybe you didn't catch it on the spreadsheet and then you notice that there's a misspelling or some information is wrong, you have to go all the way back into the system. So let me go back into the system and determine where is the best place to fix that information. So maybe you forgot to put your name here. So, you put your name and, then you can download the files again, download the forms, and it would have the 1094 corrected. And okay, so I might fix that information and then re-download the forms with that stuff there, or maybe I forgot to check this box or whatever it was. I could fix it and re-download the forms. If the employee data is wrong, like I mentioned, there's of course different things in the spreadsheet. You fix it, or you go all the way back to the employee record and regenerate. All right. So one of the things that we released sometime in last year, I don't remember if it was available for last year's forms. I want to talk about it just in case you haven't seen it before, which is this publish button. Now, this is not going to be here if you have not set this up to allow ACA forms to be published. So let me show you where that is configured there. What that allows you to do is to email and or publish them out to self-service. So that's available here under document delivery in system configuration. Again, you may not have access to this depending on your security, but I'll talk about it. And if you need it, you can talk internally about how you get that. And you'll see here, I have a couple of them set up. I'm going to just show you how it works here. You can call it whatever you like. Maybe you want to call it ACA. Here you determine which report. Now, I already selected ACA in the other one. That's why I could do it. But, if you've never done this before, you want to at least select ACA, but you'll see other options, maybe the paycheck by employee and the W-2, you can do those. Of course, it does need to be active. And then the personal email, what that will do is it will look to see, do they have a personal email address? And it will use that instead of the primary email address. So perhaps they have a home email address or Gmail or something like that, and they would like it to go there instead of their work email address. Now, if the personal email address is blank, it's going to go back to the primary email address. So it's not going to, not go out if they don't have it. But this will use that first if it's available. Of course, checking that box, if I don't select send by email, it doesn't matter what I do here because it won't send it by email. But that if that's selected, that'll work there. And then post in ESS. Well, you'll see here when I do send by email, I don't have any other options besides that. But once I select post in ESS, it asks me the path. Now, I'll show you here in a second. I already have a path configured. But if you don't, I'll show you in a second how you can select that. You don't want to do it first if you don't already have one. And what these are different folders that you have created. So I'm going to select the one here called tax documents. All you do is you click on it and you'll notice the select button, comes available and it's showing up in gray there, and you hit select. And then it will tell you the path right there. Okay, and then you just hit save. Now, where do those paths come from? That's from your documents right here under general. And you'll see various folders that I have here. There's that one called tax documents. If you don't have any here, you can create a folder. So you'll see here, I just, underneath the add button, I choose add folder, and maybe I call this ACA forms, something like that, and create that folder. And there's that new folder. And of course, if I go back to that document delivery, now I can do that. Now, if I do create a new folder and I've already done this document delivery, I want to make sure that I go back and I update this to the correct folder. We will not move it if you have selected a different folder after you've published. So if I publish a tax documents and I say, oh no, I want to go to the ACA forms, just changing in here doesn't move them automatically to the ACA forms. So if that happens, reach out to our support. We can help you with that and get something done. But we don't have a process that automatically does it if I change a form here. All right, so back to the publishing, just to talk about that here. When I go back to ACA under HR administration and into here, this will publish that. Now, remember, if you had the email configured, it's going to send out emails. So, if you're not 100% sure you're ready to go, don't push this button because it'll start sending out the forms via email, which could be problematic if you haven't checked the forms first. So just be careful with publishing them. Make sure you're 100% ready to go. And then you would hit publish, and then it would send out. Let me actually, just because this is a demo site, I don't want it to go out via email. So I'm going to turn my email off. First, I'll turn off that, and then I'm going to turn off my email. All right. So I'm just going to publish or post to self-service there. Okay. Now this will take a little bit of time because what it's doing is it's saving the individual files to each employee. It's not going to be, an all-day situation, but it's, a few seconds to go ahead and push that out to all the different employees. And then what'll happen is it'll show up in self-service. Now, one caveat is if you created a new folder, you're going to want to go into your security to make sure that people have access to that folder. It may have already been created for existing profiles, but if not, you're going to want to make sure they have access to those documents here. So you may have a new folder and make sure they get access to that. If they don't already have like system and things like that, you're going to want to make sure they get access to those folders. So that is something you will want to check is under documents. They have access to system, which is where that system, or I can't remember, system or reports, but they need to have access to these. I'll tell you in a second which one. But if they don't have this, they won't be able to see it in self-service because that's where it's going to be located. I believe it's under reports, and then, no, I'm sorry, documents and then reports. My documents and then reports and then this. So if they do not have access to that report one, they won't be able to see it even if you publish it. So that could be a crucial thing. If you accidentally publish it, you could quickly go through and disable access to that folder. Anybody who's not a system administrator, it would turn off their access. And so you kind of save you. Of course, if you had 50 different security profiles, it's a little tedious. But if there was an emergency, you could always turn off access in the security profiles to that reports folder, and at least save you a little bit of a headache until you get it cleaned up. But now I go to ACA and there's my file, and I can view my file here. Now, of course, if I send it out via email, they're going to get an email notification letting them know that, here's the attached file, and they can then, do whatever they need to do with that file. But there's my form, and I can do this. Now, you can still hand out paper copies of it, especially, to like terminated employees. You want to mail it out, I'm sure, because they may not be checking self-service. They might have changed their email address or something, so they may have no idea that it's available for them, and they don't know where to go. So always a good idea for the terminated people to send it out via email as well as paper copy. Now, one other thing I want to mention, I can't cover it right now, is we do have the option now to do this through Atrix. So I've been talking about doing it all through our system, but we now have the option under government reports to do these available right through here. So you can do the 1094, 1095 through Atrix. Now, if I do this, I want to clarify, you actually, and Patrick and Connor, if I'm wrong, let me know. You don't have to create the ACA file first. You can just go into here first and go right into that. And you don't have to go through all the steps I just covered over the last 20 plus minutes. But this has a whole wizard to walk you through it. It's very similar in that you're going to be reviewing the data, and you may make some corrections. Yeah, go ahead,
Sorry,
Connor.
Steve. Yeah, no, you do have to still generate the ACA forms,
Okay.
basically the
Okay.
way you were describing it, and then we are just passing through the data that becomes in those tables. So whether it's what you
Okay.
initially generate or what you re-import, the following step would then be to go to Atrix, which will just pass through all that information.
Yeah. So you would go and do this. It's going to ask me to log in, which I don't have a login to use here. So, but anyways, it'll take you to Atrix. So if you're using Atrix, that might be a useful tool to you. And they would handle, printing and mailing and stuff like that. It's a thing to look at if you don't want to go through that process of mailing. Atrix might be a viable option for you. You do not have to have a subscription for anything else for Atrix. If you want to just use it for ACA reporting, they offer that option, and they'll have the pricing on there and everything. It's not completely unreasonable. Of course, if they're printing and mailing it, there's a cost there that they are incurring to print and mail them out for you. So that's basically what they're doing, if you want to use that. But thank you, Connor, for that. So you do need to create the file. And of course, if there's changes, you need to make them, like you said, in the import or on the employee record when you generate. So still go through those same steps. Even if I was using Atrix and it didn't require that, I still would do it. I love double checking. So I would always look at that data. All right, so that is everything about the ACA as far as what we're doing in our system here. Let's look a little bit into the future of our schedule. So give me one moment to switch back to my PowerPoint here. All right, so this is our upcoming Criterion Learning Series webinars. We have a whole slew of these scheduled for the entire year, but these are the next 4 that are out there. So in 2 weeks, we're going to be covering shift rates. This is actually a topic we have not covered before. So if you're interested in how shift rates work in the system, that's to give shift differential for possibly working different times of the day. We're going to talk about how that works. It's really a payroll topic, but maybe you're interested in that. So you're welcome to join us there, or have your payroll folks join us if they would like to learn how that works. We are going to revisit ACA reporting again, as you can see there, at the end of February on the 27th. Of course, with those deadlines, if you haven't done it between now and then, maybe you just need a quick refresher. You have some questions that came up as you're processing, and you're okay to wait. We are going to be covering it again. So certainly welcome to join us then. Then we're going to cover overtime rules. Again, another topic that we haven't covered in detail on our learning series. So we're going to cover that. The first one in March is the one we cover overtime rules, how that all works. And then we're going to revisit a topic that we haven't talked about in a couple of years, which is ESS widgets and calendars. So some really nice topics that we either haven't touched on or haven't touched on in a long time. So get a little refresher on those there. As always, if you have questions, you can reach out to us, help@criterionhcm.com, or if you are working through a partner, you can reach out through them first, and we'll be happy to help you out and answer your questions. So thank you for joining us today. We really appreciate your time, and I look forward to seeing you all again in a couple of weeks. Thank you.